So, demo editing, demo scripting, demo files. What does all this actually boil down to? Well, first and foremost, let me make something very clear about what demo files are not. They are not video, okay? They are, at their core, a series of instructions given to the game engine, telling it what to render. What do I mean by this? Well, with a video, let's say you make a mistake. For instance, here we have a scene where we're fighting two free Reichsmen. But let's say we were actually supposed to have Black Scorpion in there. In the case of a video, we would have to go back, get everything back into position, rerun everything with the change being Scorpion instead of Reichman in the containment vessel. With demo editing, it's simply a line of code that we change telling the engine to use the Black Scorpion model instead of the Reichman model.
Alrighty, so the demo file itself. Honestly, all it is a text file with a series of line items. On a Windows computer, you can very easily use Notepad for editing them. There are a couple fan-made tools out there. For this demonstration, I'm going to be using Notepad. And I'm just going to go through several lines of the code to explain what the code structure is and what you really need to know. For this comic project, we really shouldn't be doing anything really demanding in terms of demo work. It's going to be moreover, we need this like 3-second demo to get this one shot of this character in this location doing this thing. Off the top of my head, I would say the most difficult thing we should need to demo edit is possibly having 2 or 3 characters in one shot involved in a fight. And even then, it should only be, one character falling back while the second character hits the third character, that kind of thing. Anyway, the demo file itself. If we go through it line by line, well, we can understand it in pieces a little bit better, and then come back to understand how everything fits together. So, alright, so I turned on magnifier to give you guys a better view at the top of the screen of the line I'm talking about. So, line number 1. I honestly have no idea what the version 2 relates to, but I do know if you take out this line or change the 2 after version to anything other than a 2, the demo won't work. So just assume that any demo has to have the 1.0 version 2 to begin with. Now the next line. Okay. The demos are primarily organized into 3 columns. The first column is how many milliseconds after the last event this line item is going to start on. In the case of this line item, it starts at the same time as the first line. The second item, or the second column, is the unit or entry number item. In this case, this is item 0 because it's actually part of the map itself. And then finally, the third column is the actual command. In this particular case, it is telling the demo, load a map from this location. Okay? I'll get a little bit more into maps in a later video. For now, just understand when it says map here, it needs to have a map here. Okay? And this next line, once again, 0 milliseconds after the last event, item 0, that's the map itself, will be set to time number 10.378326. Time is measured in 24-hour increments, or rendered as 24-hour increments in the demo system for City of Heroes. So with this time code, I can tell you it's going to be a little after 10:30 in the morning. If the demo is indoors, it doesn't matter. If it is outdoors, this is the part of the demo code that determines whether the game renders the scene as night or day. Okay. Next line. Okay. Once again, 0 milliseconds after the last event. New item number 1. Creating new entry named Crusher Rasad. So on this line, it's telling us new entry that will be named Crusher Rasad that will have the designation number 1. Okay. Then the next line, again, 0 milliseconds after the last line item. Entry number 1 will use a costume file. And then the whole rest of this line and the next 15 lines actually have to do with player costume. I'm not going to get into that a lot just because anything and everything you can possibly do in demo editing with player costumes, you can do 1,000 times faster through Icon. And I will talk about Icon in the tools video. So, next thing. This line is going to be the one that you're going to need to know probably the most about, and that's because it has the move command in it. So, once again, 0 milliseconds after the last entry, entry number 1, once again, this was the player character Crusher Rasad with costume, yada 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 yada. We'll be using the move command Axe Chop, and it has a 1 after it because with player characters you have the ability to customize weapons, and a 1 will show the weapon while a 0 will only use the default that is used with the basic animation or move command. So anytime you see a character doing something other than just standing there in a comatose slump, it uses a move command for that animation. So when a character is jumping, running, sliding to the left, punching, kicking, flipping, there is a move command attached to it. Okay. Next line, this is an FX entry line. Once again, 0 milliseconds after the last item, entry number 1 is using an FX. In this case, it's a maintained FX from weapons. It's pulling out the custom mace option. Honestly, effects you should not be using much of because honestly, they're a pain in the butt. Any one little tiny thing goes wrong or is entered incorrectly with them, and it stops the entire effect or draws on the wrong effect or changes the color or whatever. It's certainly entertaining when you see someone use an axe chop move, but they're pulling out a blaster rifle. Even more so when they suddenly have the effect of poison. So, but generally speaking, we're only going to be using very basic effects, just because they don't edit terribly well in Photoshop and tend to make things more complicated. This may change down the line as we get more proficient and get more streamlined of a process, but for the moment, we're probably going to be using FX very sparingly in demos. Again, the big one you want to know is move. More FX, more FX. And so you wind up having a whole bunch of FX stacking on top of a particular entity from game. Again, we will probably not use very many FX in demos. Now, here is one line that will come up occasionally, but it's not a critical thing that you know. Once again, 0 milliseconds after the last item, entry number 1 will have HP valued at 2084.4. So what this is saying is this item will have 2084.4 hit points. What is this used for? Anytime you have an entity that can show damage and it's visually different when it is damaged, the game needs to know its current health points compared to its total health point to calculate what version of it to show. For instance, when you're attacking a car, the car has, if memory serves, 4 different damage states. One where it's basically new, the next one where it's a little damaged, a little beaten, the third one where it's, broken up, it's got a lot of dirt, a lot of stains, it's got more discoloration, and then finally the 4th stage, right before it blows up. So what the game will do is it will look at the item, go, it has 1,000 hit points total. If it is at 1,000 hit points, I'll show version 1. If it's at 750 points, I will show version 2. If it's at 500, version 3, so on and so forth, all the way down to 1, in which case the next hit would destroy it. So that's where the next line of the demo comes in. HP max. That is telling the game, the engine, the maximum hit points for this item is 2084.4. There are 3 other, there we go, lines we need to go over. This one, once again, 0 milliseconds after the prior item. Entry number 2, I scrolled through it, but we had a new entry, in this case named Jenna Jackson, with designator number 2. 0 milliseconds, entry number 2 will be at the position listed here. Now, this is a pretty straightforward system. It's just a 3-axis grid. The X, Y, and Z grids we all worked with in algebra in high school. The only difference here is it doesn't go X, Y, Z. It goes X, Z, Y. In this case, the middle number is the indicator of how high or low on the map it is. Now, there's no real easy way for me to give you an orientation on how to use the positioning system in maps, so I will cover that in a little more detail in a later video when I'm talking about actually making the demo itself. The next thing I need to go over is this line. Once again, 0 milliseconds after the prior item. Number 2 will have a pitch yaw roll ratio of 0 by 0.441786 by 0. For anyone who's ever done any flying, pitch yaw roll should be familiar. So using the Miss Liberty model we all saw in Atlas Park, they show what 000 looks like, which is her normal orientation. Standing up, facing forward. If you change the pitch value to 0.8, she's leaning back. Likewise, if you change the pitch value to negative 0.8, she's leaning forward. Anything up to about 3.139999, whatever, is 1/2 of a circle. Anything from 0 down to negative 3.139999 is the other half of the circle. So if they had changed the pitch in here to negative 3.13, she would basically be completely parallel to the top of this stone. Okay. The yaw rate is what determines whether she is turned to one side or the other. A positive number will turn her to the right. A negative number will turn her to the left. Again, realistically, you don't need to go any further than 3.13 because you're just going to start coming back around the other side, the other direction of the circle in that case. Then finally, roll. Roll, well, you can see it. Rolls the character across their y-axis. If you give it a positive number, it rolls them to the right. A negative number will roll them to the left. There are 2 other entries we need to go over on a demo file. The first one, I need to find it. It is the camera. There it is. Okay. So once again, 8 milliseconds after the prior line entry, the camera. The camera is a uniquely identified entry in the demo file. It's only ever cam. In this case, we'll have the position shown here with the orientation shown here. Okay. Now, the camera is important because that's where you're going to be looking. I don't care where the characters are, I don't care where the action is, I don't care what FX you have going, any of that. If the camera is not pointed at it, the demo won't show it. Now, there is a caveat to this. You ever notice in-game how the game can render depth of field, or the further away from something you are, the less clear it is? Well, the demo file has a note for that. In this case, it's called the player denominator. What this is it tells the game engine the item that this designator is connected to is the center of attention. Okay? So, as an example, usually the camera is connected to the player character, with the player character having the designated or designation of player. That way, anything that is within such and such a distance of the player is rendered as viewable. However, what happens if the camera is detached from the player? So here is the view when the camera is attached to the character and within range. Here is the view when the camera is within range of the player but detached. You can see it doesn't move in accordance with the character. Here's what happens when the camera is pointed in a direction away from the character, or rather away from the majority of the action. And here is what happens as we move further away from the character. Or from the player, excuse me. See, more and more stuff gets in the way. But you can see what happens. We start losing more and more detail. It doesn't render the map properly and everything like that. So you really got to be aware of where the camera is in relation to what we need to see. So you see, that's what you need to be aware of with the camera. You got to make sure it's in the right area, pointed in the right direction, and that there's an item designated as the player within view of all that. Otherwise, you won't be able to see it.
Alrighty, and that finishes up the introduction to demo files for demo editors, otherwise known as Demo 101. If you have any questions about the content in this video, or you'd like to schedule some one-on-one time with Toros to kind of work out more details, or figure out something that the video didn't properly explain, by all means, drop me a line, and we'll set up some time for that. Otherwise, I will see you in Demos 102.